So, welcome to everyone who's joined the Twitter space so far. Welcome. My name's Tiffany. I'm a PPC account manager at Absolute Digital Media. We have with us Julie. Julie, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Julie Friedman-Bacchini, and I have two roles really in the PPC world. I have been working in PPC since literally the beginning. So I do work with clients, excuse me, in all forms of PPC. And I also run the PPC chat community on Twitter, and I maintain a website for that as well. So we do weekly chats, and we have tons of resources. There are recaps of the chats available through PPC chat. So that is sort of me in a nutshell.
So, for those of you who don't know as well, Julie was actually nominated as what was it? One of the top people in PPC, top 25 influential people in PPC.
Yes, I did make that list. Here, I always forget to mention that. It sounds pretentious to say it about yourself, so thank you for saying.
Yes. So obviously one of the biggest things in PPC so far is it's changed so much over the last year. I mean, I know that I've been doing this for I think about 4 years now, and I think in the last year we've seen more changes than what I have seen in the last 4 years put together. So it's a very, very crazy time in PPC at the moment, and it's very difficult. One of the topic today that we've kind of come up with is how to adapt to changing advertising trends in your job role. And the reason why we've kind of picked that topic is because I don't know if you've had the same feedback, Julie, but I've had a lot of questions from people around, what is the future of PPC? How are we going to add value with all the machine learning changes and everything in that sort of respect?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's worried about that to some extent or another, whether you have been working in PPC for, a couple of years or you've been working in it for a long time. I will agree. I mean, I think this industry always has a ton of change happening. I often tell people who are newer in the industry or thinking about moving into the industry that you have to be really comfortable with the fact that nothing stays the same ever. The technology is constantly changing, the platforms are constantly changing, how you need to do things, what you're able to do or not do. But I agree with your opening statement, Tiffany, that the pace of change, not only the pace, but I think also the magnitude of the change that we have seen over the last, couple of years, but really accelerated in the last year or so. I sort of have joked, in PPC chat and then other things that we've talked about that it almost feels like they were sitting on a bunch of stuff during COVID, you know. And then when things started to sort of when people got when the platforms got things a bit sorted out as far as like how are we going to function during this pandemic, then the changes just started rolling out fast and furious, and I think more so than they have in years, at least in the last 4 or 5 years. So you're not imagining it if you're feeling like there has been a tremendous amount that has changed, or if it hasn't changed yet, it's been announced that things are going to change. So yeah, we are at a very big, I think, crossroads time in our industry.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I think one of the biggest questions that people are asking at the moment is how, as a PPC account manager, can you still add value to your clients? Obviously, with machine learning becoming a must, more and more clients are kind of asking, well, if everything's on machine learning, why do I need you? And I think that's a big concern from everyone. But I mean, I don't know if you'd agree with me, but personally, I don't think that is a concern because one of the biggest parts of our job isn't just managing PPC, but it's looking at the overall account and interpreting data. And I actually was on a call with a client the other day where they were like, well, you interpret the data, that's why we pay you. So I think that's one thing that people are missing is our job isn't just managing the account, it's about interpreting that data and passing it on to the client in a way that they can understand.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right on that. And I think that probably what's going to happen is advertisers, right, who are working with PPC professionals, whether that's in house or working with a consultant or working with an agency, I think they're going to kind of fall into two camps as all of this plays out. And you'll have some who feel like, um, you know, the platforms are offering so much because they have all this machine learning and they have automation, and we probably don't need somebody to help us manage things. And for those people who have that type of attitude, you will probably end up losing some of those folks because they're feeling like, this is the way of the future and we don't really need a human being, involved in managing. Like, why should we pay that expense when the platforms have all these tools? So I think there's going to be a certain percentage of advertisers who adopt or have that mindset. But I think there's going to be a whole other set who are going to be smarter, who are going to say, like, okay, well, if I just accept the fact that the platforms have more machine learning, they have more automation, they have more things that are available to advertisers, if all they're going to do on their accounts is just what they're able to do and what the platforms will sort of do for them, how are they going to differentiate themselves against their competitors? And I think that's the main, if you want to try to figure out like how to position this, if you want to be in the top of the advertisers that are advertising in your particular industry, you're not really going to be able to do that by just, quote unquote, leaving it to the machines. You need that extra layer of human thinking because, I know we joke about this a lot in PPC chat, but if you've ever looked at a query report in Google Ads and you see what's matching to your keywords, I mean, to me, I vacillate between laughing at some of the matches because they're so ridiculous and then being completely enraged that my clients are spending money on this stuff. But if a human being wasn't involved in that process and wasn't looking at that, I mean, this is one small example, but if you weren't looking at that, how much money might you be wasting on queries that are irrelevant or never going to convert? And so I think that's one tiny example of how having a human paying attention to things that we are still able to influence can make a tremendous difference in what your overall performance will be.
And I think there are other ways that we can add value. I mean, I know I've mentioned this quite a lot. You've heard me talk about it quite a lot in the PPC chats, but one of the biggest job roles that we're going to be having is about conversion rate optimization. Now, I don't know if you've actually taken, the Google qualifications lately, but even Google have started adding questions in their qualifications about conversion rate optimization. And I think that just kind of shows how that's going to be a big part of our job going forward.
I think so. And I think, at Google Marketing Live a couple of months ago, they were also talking about, I mean, I think things are going in that direction because they talked in the one section about responsive search ads sort of gaining a bit of a dynamic component where, and they've been a little light on the details as far as how all of this is going to work and how does this, compare to traditional dynamic search ads. But I think that the way that the destination is set up for your ads, I think is going to, not that it hasn't always mattered, because it has always mattered where you send people, right? So getting them to the click is really only part of the equation. What their experience is like and what happens after the click is arguably sometimes more important. I think we've probably all had experiences where you're looking at your numbers and you're thinking like, man, like this account is going great and you're feeling really, really good about the traffic that you're sending and what's happening. And then you have a conversation with the client and they're like, yeah, we haven't really seen leads materialize, or this hasn't really translated into sales. And then you can try to, diagnose what might be going on, and you realize there could be problems on the website side of things. So I think having skills and having the thought process to be able to bring these different aspects into the conversation when you're talking about PPC initiatives, I think it's going to become more important. It's going to be much harder to just be siloed into, I just do Google Shopping ads and I work in the interface and that's all that I do. I think that's going to be a little bit tougher as the automation continues to roll forward.
I completely agree with you there. And I think there are many other ways that you can add value as well. Like I know personally, like for those of you who know me will know that I'm very technical minded. So one of the things that I often offer my clients is a lot of technical advice, whether that's merchant center support, technical issues they might be having, their products not crawling properly. And also because I'm trained in Facebook as well, I often offer advice on Facebook, even if we're not managing that for them, because I think every little tidbit that you get is kind of like we're more becoming their partner than just, look, we manage your PPC, we're only going to give you and do stuff in your PPC. Now, I'm not saying if they don't pay you for hours to do Facebook, go and do stuff on their Facebook, but just stuff like giving them advice and helping them plan their strategy in with yours, stuff like that, I think can be very useful.
I agree with that 100%. And like I said, I've been doing this since literally the beginning of paid search. So in some ways, I'm like a weird combination of trying to, adapt and work with all of the modern things that are available, but there are parts of me that are still very old school. And I swear, and I've said this a number of times before as well, one of the biggest things that you can do, and one of the places where you can add a ton of value that a machine really can't replicate, is I do like once a quarter for my clients. I do manual searches, and there are tools. You can do it inside of Google Ads, for example, but there are other tools that will simulate like where you're searching from. I do a lot of searches because the market can shift so quickly as far as who you're competing with in the digital space. And I think that it's really easy for advertisers to only be thinking about their stuff in a vacuum, as if a person is not going to do a search and look at more than one result that comes up in that search. So I think one of the ways that we can really add value is to make sure that we continually have an up to date perspective and we share that with the clients and with the stakeholders as far as like, this is what somebody is likely to see and interact with when they're searching on, the terms that we feel are most important or most desirable to us. And I think that can be a really, really useful way to, again, cement your value as far as what you're bringing to the table. And then you use that information both to inform what you're doing inside of a platform, but also potentially like what's happening post click, what's happening on the website. What is that experience like? How does that stack up compared to the experience that a searcher might have on, the other people who are advertising? Even if you don't want to dig down into what the organic results are, you should at least have a good sense of what the user experience would be like for someone who clicks on the other ads, that you're regularly showing up against.
That's a really great point. And I think sometimes looking at competitor websites and stuff like that and what landing pages they're showing for certain ads will give you really great insight on what you can do better on your own website and your own ad.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's usually an exercise. I found anyway that when you do it, it's usually an exercise where you find some things that you're like, oh, that's really cool. Like we should try to add something like this or modify. You'll come up with some ideas that you want to try, both on the pre-click and the post-click side of things. And then sometimes you look at other sites and it makes you feel really good about where you and your brand or your client is, in that continuum of what somebody would experience when they clicked through on your ad versus perhaps some of the other advertisers. But being blind to where you are in that hierarchy, I think is just dumb. So again, I know everybody likes to have, tools to do this and do that. I feel like there's no there's no substitute, at least that I have found, and maybe there's something I'm unaware of, but for me, there's not really a substitute for doing those searches myself where I am having a similar experience to what my target audience or what a searcher who would be, putting in a query that would be highly desirable. What I'm able to really be in their shoes, right? Like, what are they seeing? What's stacking up? So,
Well, if there's one thing that I think machines are never going to be able to understand, that's human behavior. I think
yes.
that's something that only people can understand.
Yeah, I think the machine learning is being sold as really understanding nuance and really understanding intent. And I just don't think that it does. I think it does up until a point, but then I think it really falls off a cliff as far as, being able to make distinctions that a human being could make very, very easily. If you've been working in this industry for any time, and particularly if you've been working with a client for a period of time and you're reviewing query reports and you're doing things like that, you develop a sense of what terms work, as far as conversions. And then, for example, what queries are coming in that aren't great for conversions on the paid side of things. But I think another place where we can add value is pulling that data out and organizing it and then turning it back over to the clients or your stakeholders for, hey, these terms aren't really great for the paid side of things, but this is content you may wish to develop on your organic side, you know? So I think again, we can create value and we can create a sense of really being interested in the whole picture and the success of the bottom line by using our brains and pulling some of that information out to be able to share, to be utilized in other ways by the advertiser. And a machine's never going to be able to do that.
I agree. And I think the next question we have, which is a really interesting topic at the moment, is what does privacy mean for marketing? Now, we're going to see a lot of changes over the future, and it's interesting because when Germany banned GA4, I said to myself, like when it banned Google Analytics, I said to myself, they're gonna bring up GA4 now because I think Google's gonna hope that GA4 won't be banned. But it's interesting because Italy have now come out and said that they've banned Google Analytics, but GA4 is not going to be a resolution for it because the problem is the way that they send the data to the US government, which seems to be no way around it. So I think that's like very interesting at the moment that they've kind of rushed bringing out GA4, and I don't think it's actually going to resolve anything.
We could talk for 3 hours about Google Analytics for, but I think in general, privacy is something that we're going to hear more about and not less. And we're going to hear about it from a lot of different angles and a lot of different perspectives. I feel like that beast has been woken, and it's not really going to go back to sleep. So between regulatory things that are happening in Europe and in the United States, that's all going to have an impact on things. Actions that the different platforms are taking in the name, I like to call it under the banner of privacy. Google uses that a lot as their excuse for, why we can't see certain types of data. It's privacy, privacy, privacy. And then, of course, you have the whole loss of data that had been freely flowing prior to, Apple blowing all of that up. So a lot is happening in the privacy sphere that is directly impacting the way that we as PPC professionals have managed our accounts and have created strategy and frankly have even positioned and talked about things with our clients and stakeholders. I think we're at a place where we are going to have to really take up the mantle and change the expectations and have some difficult conversations with the clients and stakeholders about just what is possible now because of all the things that are swirling around and happening relative to privacy. So I think it's a huge issue that is already, the effects are already being felt. But I think we're at the very, very beginning stages of what this is going to do to our entire ecosystem.
I agree. I think there's going to be a lot of changes. Like, I think eventually, if you don't have a cookie banner, you won't be able to advertise on Google Ads. I think stuff like that's going to start coming in. We already know there's certain servers that block analytics, and I think there could be possibly more servers as more are getting introduced. Like, I believe it's Firefox, is it, that blocks analytics? I know there's one of them that blocks analytics completely.
I think Mozilla, who makes Firefox, I believe that they just started doing that
Yeah.
recently. And we haven't even touched on everything having to do with privacy. And I think, again, we've talked about this a bit in PPC chat, and Google was pushing this very hard, and they're not the only platform that's pushing this very hard. And that is the whole concept of first party data and uploading, customer data to an ad platform. I think, and I've said this repeatedly, I think that has huge risk implications for advertisers, and it represents a gigantic shift for the risk relative to privacy and privacy regulation. It takes a lot of that off of the ad platform and it puts it squarely onto the advertiser. So I think that first party data is being pushed as the answer or the antidote to the loss of data, particularly what we've experienced with cookies going away, with Apple's iOS 14.5. There are a number of factors that have made less data available to platforms, so they can't function in the way that they historically have. And the best answer they seem to have come up with at this juncture is, I know, why don't you just upload all of your data and then you'll be responsible and we'll use it and everything will be fine. So I have been, sort of shouting from the, the mountaintop here to make sure that you have your ducks in a row. And, if you're a brand, if you're an agency working with clients, obviously our responsibility is not specifically risk management, but I think that it is within our responsibility as good partners to bring up these concerns and say, this is something that you should be discussing with your legal and your risk management teams to make sure that you have everything in place so that you're not going to potentially run afoul of privacy regulations. And then rather than it being the platform doing it, it will be potentially you or your client or your brand who had the violation because you uploaded you uploaded that data. So we're moving fast and hard into that new era, and I think none of that aspect is really really being talked about with any kind of volume.
And I think it's really difficult as well because I know that I had a lot of conversation with clients about using email addresses, especially on Facebook, where I said, "Are your email addresses GDPR compliant?" Obviously, because a lot of them targeting the UK, it would be something else if it was the US. But yeah, are you GDPR compliant? Are your email addresses? And then a lot of them they say, "Oh, we don't know." So I'd say, well, if you don't know, then we won't put the email addresses on because we don't want to run that risk. But a lot of them will ask, well, how do I know they're GDPR compliant? And, I often don't enter into that conversation with them because I wouldn't even know where to start because it's such a complex thing that I would usually say, oh, do you know what? We advise you go speak to your lawyers or, if you have a department that deals with GDPR.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't hold my. I follow all this stuff because obviously it impacts what we do. But I would never, like you, I would never give specific advice of like, oh, this is exactly how you should do it. But I will bring up the fact that this is a potential liability issue, and if you want to proceed with what is being pushed and recommended by the various ad platforms, which is you uploading your customer information, then it's in your best interest to make sure that you are in compliance with whatever is required to be able to do that, because you are clicking a box on every single one of these platforms. And some folks have said, oh, well, have if you're an agency or a consultant, like just have the advertiser do it, don't ever have that data pass through you or whatever. And that's a whole separate area of concern. But at the end of the day, if first party data is going to be uploaded, somebody's clicking a box that says, yes, we have consent to do this. So I think you want to make sure that that is in fact true, because if you click that and that's not true and you're not prepared, you can end up in hot water, and it could turn out to be pretty expensive.
I agree. And I think the next kind of question we had was, and for those of you who are big in PPC, this is kind of like what we would consider a swear word of PPC, broad match keywords.
Oh, broad match, yes. Google, I mean, clearly, again, if you watched any of the Google Marketing Live event from the end of May, they've been pushing, in all of 2022, they have been pushing the, smart bidding plus broad match. Like it's not the old broad match, it's the new broad match. And to be fair, there have been quite a number of people who have been experimenting with it, who have been reasonably pleased or very pleased with the results that they've had. Again, I think that your mileage may vary, and it's geared towards using broad match the way that Google wants you to use it is definitely geared towards high volume accounts where you have a lot of conversion actions happening. And it's definitely, I think, more geared towards the e-com side of things versus lead generation. And I say that because the lead generations tend to typically have less volume than an e-com account. So as with everything that's coming out with the machine learning, with the automation, I think you want to think about testing it and think about trying it, but you don't want to go whole hog. You don't just want to flip a switch when you have the opportunity. I think you want to carve out some budget, and then you want to try it and you want to see how it performs with your specific industry and what you're targeting, and all of that, and see. And in some cases it may work great and you might be very pleasantly surprised. In other cases you may feel like, wow, we just burned x amount of money to find out that broad match is still something terrible. So you know it it remains to be seen if we will get to a point where broad match is the only option. I could absolutely foresee that happening. I have zero inside information on that, but I wouldn't be shocked if we reached a point sometime in the next year or two where keywords are not done away with completely, but the only option you really have left would be broad match. So we shall see.
One of the biggest advice that I would offer to people that are planning on trying broad match keywords, because it can work, because I've got them in some of my accounts and they work. But one of the biggest piece of advice that I would give is if you do some keyword research, whether that's on Keyword Planner or SEMrush, you can see what irrelevant traffic is most likely going to come through. So you can use that keyword research as a base for your negatives to kind of have a look in the account before you set that live so that you're not reacting. So you're basically what's the word, predicting what negatives might come through rather than reacting and seeing a lot of wasted budget.
Yeah, I mean, I think Google would tell you, like, you don't have to bother with that. Like, we're going to figure it out. We're going to use all the signals and all the data that we have access to that you mere mortal advertisers don't. That's kind of Google's party line. I think in reality, unless you've got money to burn, which most most advertisers don't, then yeah, if you can preemptively put together negative lists, it's changing the nature, I think, of the work that needs to be done on the front end, where um, if you are utilizing broader match types, obviously, there's enough fuzziness, frankly, that happens whether when you're using exact and phrase match. Um, but if you're going to dip your toes into the broad match waters, if you can preemptively negative out some terms that are probably going to get traffic and are not good for you, then yeah, you can save that money. But it does represent a shift, I think, in the amount of keyword research and the type of keyword research that we might be engaging in prior to setting up a new campaign.
I agree. And then we're just coming to the last couple of minutes, so I just wanted to touch upon the last topic we had, which was around paid social. So I know personally that Facebook, since iOS 14.5 update, Facebook has been struggling, but lately they've stripped back their interests. Their interests are very, very broad now. And since they've done that, I kind of feel like at the moment with Facebook, it means that less conversions are coming through and the CPL is going up and the spend is going up. So I kind of feel like personally from me that the way that paid social is going with the changes to interests and that sort of thing, that it's going to be seen as more a brand awareness. And I know that I'm getting a lot of clients that are kind of seeing it more as brand awareness now. I'm not sure what you found on that as well, Julie.
Yeah, I think that, iOS 14 sort of took away a decent amount of the what I used to refer to as like the superpower of advertising on Facebook, which was, if you ask advertisers what are they looking for in advertising? What are they trying to do? And it really boils down to something as simple as this. What they would love would be to find more customers who are like their top 20%, like best customers, right? Like these are awesome customers for us. These are people who are great fits. Go find more of them. And historically, Facebook was great at that. I mean, the lookalike audience was just like, it was the holy grail when it came to, being able to do almost exactly that. But iOS 14 really pulled the rug out from under a lot of those capabilities. And I think, again, when I was talking earlier about part of what we as professionals are going to need to be doing and should be doing now and will continue to be doing for a while is we have to recontextualize and recalibrate for our clients and for our stakeholders what's possible now. Because I think there are a lot of things that used to be possible that you just can't do in the same way that you used to be able to do. And then you have to figure out what that means. And that could very well mean that what you're doing on social is primarily awareness and then maybe also like retargeting. So you're taking folks who have reached you in one way or the other but haven't completed a conversion action, let's say, and you're going to choose to advertise to them on a platform like Facebook. um, but I think you're 100% right that the not only the amount of information that Facebook had to process to be able to match people more successfully with interests and audiences, that has decreased. And then the things that you can opt for, like the audience that you can craft within Facebook, without using first party data, but just within their interests that are available, that is significantly not what it once was. So yeah, it is all really, really changing.
I agree. I agree. So, but that's all we have time for today. So I would like to thank you, Julie, for joining me in the chat. It's definitely been interesting. I hope everyone that's tuned in has found something helpful or taken something away from this chat. But yeah, tweet Absolute Digital Media with any questions that you might have, and we'll be happy to answer them. And obviously, Julie, if you want to tweet Julie, she's at Neptune. Is that right?
Yep, at Neptune Moon. And yep, you can find me. I hang out a lot on Twitter. Obviously, running PPC chat. I'm on Twitter a lot, so you can always find me there if you have any questions. And thank you, Tiffany, so much for having me. It was fun.
Great. Thank you.